Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to sort of the first video that I'm making on Stable Diffusion. I'm just kind of recording this off the cuff, and I've got Automatic1111 up behind me. A lot of you guys, like, if you've been doing this, you're going to know this stuff, so this is not going to be the video for you. This is for people who are, like, kind of new to Automatic1111, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of ones. Anyways, this is like for new people who sort of want to get the lay of the land. I haven't done like a fresh install of this in a while. If that's something that y'all are interested in, I can try and run through that as well in a separate video. But if you've already got it installed, you've already got it up and running, then this is where we're at. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. If you guys find this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, be sure to give me a like, consider subscribing. I do want to make some more things, and be sure to drop questions, questions about this video, and maybe some future videos that you'd like to see, and I will try to answer those as best I can. But anyways, let's get into it. So when you're looking at Stable, when you open up Stable Diffusion and it gets to where it runs, it gives you the URL, and you come to this. Let's just kind of start here at the top. So at the very top left up here, you're going to have your Stable Diffusion checkpoint. This just kind of shows up here at the top, and there's plenty of checkpoints to pick from on various different places. Like, I mean, Reddit's a good place to check for them, but like Civitai is like civitai.com. That's CIVITAI.com is a really good place to look for model checkpoints. But basically, these checkpoints are going to be what, like, different styles or flavors can be baked into these over the top of the sort of base Stable Diffusion model checkpoints. These have been trained on different things. So obviously your base Stable Diffusion checkpoint, I have quite a few of these, but you're going to have like, your 76V EMA .ckpt. That's like the base Stability AI Stable Diffusion checkpoint. That's actually, I think that's 2.0, and it was trained on 768 by 768 pixels, so it thinks sort of in larger squares. And so that's kind of like right here. We'll kind of jump down here real quick and talk about this. So like if you set this to 768 by 768, that's sort of where that checkpoint tends to shine. But yeah, a lot of these I picked up just off of Civitai, and so go around, have a look over there. Like, so you can see right here, I have Stable Diffusion 1.4. That's just going to be your base model. And then all of these other ones are going to be trained off of, they're sort of like offshoot model checkpoints that have had some more images trained in to go after sort of a particular aesthetic. Like, for example, you got some that like do like t-shirt design sort of inspired, or realistic images, or vector art, things like that. So a lot of different neat things you can do depending on what checkpoint you plug in. Different checkpoints are going to handle different prompts a little bit better or worse depending on what you've selected. And then not everybody's going to have this right here. I actually enabled this to show up here, but this is just so I can change my VAE depending on what I'm working with. A lot of times Automatic will be fine in the settings, or, that way, like if you need to load another one or the base one or whatever, like if it's got one baked in, that'll be fine. If it doesn't have one baked in, then, you'll have to, this one's a pretty good one, and this is available. I don't have the site on hand right now. I'd have to look, but you can get these VAEs. And I'm not going to get into like the technical side of what a VAE is, because honestly, I don't really know. I'm not going to lie. But a lot of times this one works pretty well, or Automatic is usually what I run. So anyways, coming on down, we have a couple different tabs here. If you're looking at the UI, you have text to image. So here in text to image, what we're doing is we are entering a prompt, our positive and our negative below it here, and just basically telling it, okay, this is what I want to generate. So we could say something like, I want to make a picture of a chair in an abandoned hospital. I don't know, that's random, like whatever. And so you would type that in, and let's say, well, I mean, we can generate one. There you go. We have our chair. It's in an abandoned hospital. Let's say we don't want the chair to be, or we don't want the floor to be dirty or something. I don't know. So we can put like dirty floor in the negative prompt to try and move it away from that. There you go. For a second. I mean, the floor's like a little bit cleaner. Obviously, we'd have to like, work with it a little bit more. But for example purposes, this is telling it, okay, this is what I want to see in the image. That's your positive prompt. And then down here, you have your negative prompts. These are things you don't want to see in the image. These are things you want to move away from. So this over here is your little counter for how many tokens you've used. So I've got 9 tokens used. Down here, we've got 2, dirty floor. And the token is just like words, basically, that you've put in. And so if you want to, start really adding on things, and this is not really what this tutorial is about, but you would add a comma, and then you could add, some other stuff like dimly lit or something creepy, something like that, and you just kind of separate your thoughts by commas, essentially. And there's a lot of ways to like play around with prompting and reordering, and that's like a whole other thing. But basically what I wanted to say was, this is your positive, and then this is your negative. So again, coming back up here, because we didn't quite finish, we have text image. We're just giving it text, and then it's going to feed us an image based on what we enter in those text fields. If you come over to image, you have the same thing. But what we have here is you would insert an image and then do the same thing where you kind of tell it what you want it to turn it into. And this can be done in conjunction a lot of times with different model checkpoints and stuff to change style. That's what a lot of people did back in the early days, especially back when we first all started tinkering with this. This is kind of like this is the style change area. So I don't do a lot of image to image anymore, to be honest. And I'll touch more on that a little bit later. But the extras tab, you come over here, and this is where we just have like some utility kind of things where you can send things over here from other parts of the UI. So you can send an image from text to image or image to image. It'll show up here. And really what I use this tab for, and what everybody uses this tab for, is the upscaler. And so you can upscale X amount here. There's no stable diffusion involved with these upscales. They just run off of either just Lanczos, which is a sharpening sort of upscaler, and then you have some different models, essentially, you can download for upscalers, and they do things a little bit differently. Like 4x Full Hardy Remicry is sort of it handles realistic imagery a little bit better. Something like Lollipop is going to handle artistic images, things that are illustrated, drawn, stuff like that a little bit better. And none of these are going to be like perfect upscalers, but if you do this in conjunction with inpainting, which I do a lot, it can handle the job pretty well. You also have some batch processing stuff you can do here. I don't mess with this a lot, but you can, I actually did this one the other day, batch from directory. I gave it a folder on my computer and was able to upscale an entire folder, and it just kind of runs, and then you can output them to a new folder if you would like. So that's the extras tab. It's just kind of some utility stuff. You can come into the PNG info tab you drop an image in, and it will sort of give you the information on that PNG if there's any sort of PNG metadata attached to that file in the chunks or whatever, heard people call it. Checkpoint mergers, not something I've really messed around with a lot, so I'm not going to talk about this, but what people are doing here with checkpoint mergers is they're taking these checkpoints and they're putting them in, and then they're making like a mix, right? Say they have like a really realistic image model that they really like how it makes people, but they want to add in another model that may handle something a little better than that model does. You can do like a mix and make your own custom models that way. And yeah, so here we have the train tab. This is a different way to come in and train hypernetworks or embeddings like textual inversion embeddings. You have a preprocess image tab. This is really handy for if you're trying to create like a LoRa or an LoRa, which is another sort of embedding model you can use. And you give it a source directory and a destination directory like we did on the extras tab batch process, and it'll analyze the images for you if you check use blip for caption. And you can use that to quickly create some text documents that go alongside your images, and then you can go in and clean those captions up and make them sort of suit your purposes a little bit better. This is an extension, Open Pose Editor. This actually works with ControlNet, which we'll get back to once I go back to the main text to image tab. But what you can do is you can just like pose your a handy skeleton in here, and then you can send that over to text to image or image to image and use it in conjunction with ControlNet, which is another extension, a very, very powerful extension, I might add. And so you can, your character will roughly be in this pose once you send that over and use ControlNet. So a very handy extension for some kind of quick and dirty pose work. Here's the depth library. This is another extension that I have. I don't have a lot of poses in here. I'm sure there's a lot more you can add as you go along, but basically it's to help with hands, and you can kind of position them and help give Stable Diffusion an idea of what hand pose and position you would like. Again, this works in conjunction with ControlNet. And then here we have like a myriad of settings. A lot of times like the default ones are pretty good. I haven't really changed a lot of these settings. I can make a separate settings video if you guys would like. I'm not going to like get into all that right now. But here's the extensions that I have currently on here. And you can come over and you can check the available extensions by hitting load from. And if you can kind of go in and click them and read about them and stuff like that. A lot of these are available right here. Or if you have a directory, say from like somebody's YouTube video or somewhere on Reddit, somewhere you saw, you can check it out and put it in here and get it if it's not in this list. I'm always, be a little bit cautious, especially with a lot of this stuff when you're downloading from sort of obscure places, because you don't want to download something that doesn't need to be there, or maybe somewhat malicious. I should also talk about, speaking of malicious stuff, see how this model checkpoint for deliberate v2 says .safe tensors. This is about the safest file extension format that you want to be looking for when looking for model checkpoints. CKPT is fine, but people can sneak things in there. Not saying people can't sneak things in safe tensors, but this is definitely usually a lot safer. So anyways, let's come back to text to image. We'll come down here and we'll keep working down now that I've run through those tabs. So here is your sampling method. And there's a bunch of different samplers available, and these will sort of change the way your image looks. So this is like a Euler A, and the little lowercase a stands for ancestral. And a big thing to keep in mind with ancestral samplers, if you're looking through this list, like this one's got it, this one's got it, any of those little A's, these images do not converge whenever you're running with these samplers. So they're not going to be trying to work towards, like, the more sampling steps you give them, basically the more iterations you're wanting it to run on whatever idea you give it up here, it won't ever be converging on one particular image with an ancestral sampler. It's sort of like flip-flops it changes to something new every single step. Whereas with something like another one of my favorites to use, this is actually the one I use the most, DPM++ 2M Keras. This one is a converging sampler because it's not ancestral, so it will converge on a specific image. Usually this starts to happen somewhere around 20 to 30 steps, pretty typically anyway from what I noticed. So let's run one here on DPM++ 2M Keras. So here you go. Our chair kind of looks like that. Then I could set this way up here to like 100. And you see it did add quite a few more things. Let's see if we can back that back down just to kind of show my point. Let's see if we can find like where it converges. So this one's actually, looks like it's still changing quite a lot, surprisingly. But as you can see here, this image looks a lot like our image that we had a second ago with the window in the background. It's just a little bit different, but I really like this sampler. It's really all personal preference. A lot of people are going to ask, what's the best sampler to use? What should I be using? It's up to personal preference. And you can run split tests with these and see which one sort of fits your purposes a little bit better. But yeah, since I was over here talking about sampling steps, let's talk about sampling steps. This is basically like how many images or like I tend to think of it like it's stacking images on top of each other to sort of like figure out what, from the noise that it's trying to make the image from, it's like, how many images do you want me to try and use to try and figure it out, basically. So if I set this something on like really low, like 5, you can see how it like doesn't really have a very good idea. It's like there's still like a lot of noise. It doesn't really represent anything. And that's because you haven't really given it a lot of steps or iterations to try and figure that out. Whereas if you, and a lot of these samplers, usually around 20 is where they start to work pretty decently. So obviously that's a chair. Like we've given it enough steps to kind of figure that out. And so again, this is something you can have a play with to see sort of where you want to operate at. I like 20 to start, to just kind of like start running through images and finding things. And then whenever you find something you like, you can bring the seed in over here, and then you can up the step count to see if it polishes up the image just a little bit more. Some other things to talk about, I sort of mentioned on this, or touched on this a little bit earlier. Width and height, this is just like how, like the output of your image, where it's going to be at. So like we could change this to be 768 by 512, and that'll give us a landscape generation. You can see here, it added a couple more chairs, and we have a wider image. It's more of a landscape format. And you can do the opposite. You could flip them here with this button. Now we should get a portrait image, just like that. So one thing to keep in mind with something like Deliberate V2, this is a Stable Diffusion 1.5 based checkpoint. And so it's going to work best around the 512 area, because that's where a lot of 1.5's models are trained. I wouldn't go up above 768. You can, of course, if your GPU VRAM can handle it. It's like I could put 1024 or whatever. Maybe not 20,124. That's a little bit much. But, okay, I swear I can type. 1024, it's going to do some weird things whenever you start doing it like this. This one came out like sort of okay, but you can tell that like the way the room is, it's like a little weird right in here. And if you're trying to work on any kind of like characters, like people or something like that, and you start doing dimensions that Stable Diffusion wasn't trained on, you're going to start having issues where like their torsos are like really elongated. They're going to have like, heads on top of heads, or like weird things, because you're just getting outside of the dimensions of what it knows to recognize. So I recommend not going any higher than 768 on either one of these dimensions. You can always upscale and in Paint and do stuff like that afterwards, or you can run something like high-res fix. Sometimes with high-res fix, though, you'll still sort of get that issue. So I would stick with 512 and no more than 768 myself. That's what I typically do. Your batch count. So we have batch count and batch size. These are a little bit different. What batch count is going to do, I can set it to like, let's say 4 images. And so what batch count is going to do is it's going to run one image, and then it's going to run another image, and then it's going to run another image up to 4. And so we'll let it do that, and it's going to spit out 4 images of our chairs in an abandoned hospital. Cool, here you go. And you're going to get the same result, like you get your 4 chairs over here in the preview window. You have a grid that it will give you of all 4 together, just so you can kind of quickly look, or you can go through and look through one by one. And you're still going to get 4 images if you set batch size to 4. But what batch size is doing is it's actually running those images all at the same time. So if I press generate, you can see it doesn't run through one by one by one. It does all 4 at the same time, and then gives me the 4 separate variations at the end. So batch size is like really dependent on how much GPU VRAM you have, how high you can take this number. I usually don't go above 4 myself anyway, just because I think it's easier for me to look at 4 images and sort of analyze, which one looks the best. Whereas if it spits out 8, I get lost in a grid with 8 images. I get lost in there and I gloss over some details. So for my workflow, it's easier for me to look at 4 images at a time. But you can really sometimes you can get faster results. Find the batch size that works for your GPU, and you can get your results a little bit faster sometimes working with batch size over batch count, because it's basically processing all of those images concurrently, rather than one after the other. So sometimes it can go a little bit faster, your generations with batch size. CFG scale is basically how much do you want Stable Diffusion to read your prompt and go by your prompt. By default, it's set at 7. I find 7 works pretty good. I also sort of tend to favor somewhere around 9 or 10 sometimes if I'm wanting it to like really kind of stick to the prompt. But usually like 7 to 10 is about where I hang out. 7's about the minimum that you're going to want to go. When I was first starting learning all this could be different now too, by the way, but I found that for myself, 7 to 10 is usually pretty good. Sources back when I was learning this recommend, and this is why I say I'm kind of out of the loop on this, is because I really kind of quit messing with it because my results were fine within here. But 7 to 14 is about what you're going to want to do, but you're going to start getting like sort of different things. Like let's run this at 14 and see what it gets. So you can see here that we're kind of starting to get some, it's like a little more grainy. It's not quite as clear. And it's also, you're starting to get some weird sort of noise and kind of like burnt areas. If that makes sense. We can max it like way up higher, not max it, but like you can see how it's starting to like cook it. It's starting to look like really cooked. And that's tends to be what happens when you go up in CFG. If you come down real low, you can run it and you can see that it's still that, but it's really sort of dreaming a little bit more. We'll put it in quotes, dreaming a little bit more and kind of doing it. It's kind of flying loosey-goosey, you know? It's sort of making up its own rules at this point. We're still sort of getting what we're looking for, and these are actually kind of cool images, come to think of it. But if you're going for, you know, just sort of something that's a little more photoreal or whatever, like this is like sort of okay. So again, so much of this is personal preference. It's hard to recommend one setting, but I found that like 7 to 10 usually works pretty good for my purposes. So coming down here to seed, this is sort of like, you know, I think a lot of us are probably familiar with what seeds are, but like say if you play games or whatever, but the seed, when it's set to -1, that's going to be a random seed every single time. And you can see your seed down here in the information under the last generation. That's the seed it used. So let's say, you know, I really like this image. I'm going to want to reuse that seed again. And so we'll bring that seed over here. And this is basically like, you know, just roll of the dice, basically. That's why they put a dice here. If your seed is good or bad, depending on what you're looking for. Let's say we liked this image and we want to run that again. If we change no settings at all, like we changed nothing else, put this seed back in, we'll hit generate and we'll find that image again. Whereas obviously if we didn't use the seed, we would be getting something different. Now, you can keep your same seed, but as you start to play with the prompt, depending on how many changes you make, you know, it's not gonna generate the same image because you're introducing another variable. So let's say like orange lighting for some reason, and we'll put that in and see how like it's a pretty similar image to what was just shown, but now we've got orange. So this is something to keep in mind. If you find a seed you like, as you're hunting through your variations, you can hit this button and it'll recycle that seed and bring it over here. If you need to set it back to -1, obviously you can type it, or you can hit the dice and that'll set it back to -1. And then we're back to getting random generations. So something to keep in mind there. Here on the extras tab, I actually haven't played with this a whole lot, so I'll have to report back to you guys on doing like variation seeds and the strength and all of that. I haven't really messed with that too much, to be quite honest. PoseX is another ControlNet extension. I'm not going to mention too much on that right now. It's a lot like Open Pose Editor here that I showed y'all. It's just a different one. If you enable it and send it to ControlNet, you can kind of, you know, move the skeleton around more in a 3D space. It's kind of hard to use sometimes, but it's pretty neat if you kind of need that sort of 3D perspective to get a better idea of how you're posing your character. So here's ControlNet. This one's massive. I could probably I will make a separate video on ControlNet sometime. Basically what this does is you can insert an image here. Let's say you already have a picture of a chair in a room, but you want to make it a chair that's sitting in an abandoned hospital. What you can do is like drop one in here. You'll enable it, and then there's a bunch of different preprocessors. Again, I can't get into it right now because this video is already getting long. Sorry about that. But there's a lot of different models you can use with ControlNet, and it will really, really help guide Stable Diffusion, like sort of like on rails, basically, how much it guides it like a train on rails, to keep the composition of your image similar to the one you drop in here. It's a really powerful tool. But that's another great extension. In the scripts thing, we have some scripts. Prompt matrix, I haven't done a ton of work with. Prompts from file or text box. So if you have like a file that has a bunch of different prompts in it, you can get it to run things from here. This is the one I use the most, the XYZ plot. Actually, just used to be an XY plot. Now they've added a Z axis. But you can come in here and you can change a bunch of different things and give it some values, and it'll give you, this is how you do your split tests, pretty typically is what I use it for. So I mentioned earlier that like something like sampler is going to be your personal preference. Let's find our sampler here. And so what we can do is we can come in, and they've actually added this handy button now. You can paste the available samplers that you have into this field. That's so much nicer. Used to, you'd have to come up here, and what I did was I wrote all of these down in a text document in this format, and then would copy and paste it in because they didn't have this function. So this is super nice of them to add. But you can do this, and then we can come in here, we can hit generate, and it's going to run that on all of the different samplers and then feed us an image that will allow us to compare it and see, you know, which one we like, basically. So we'll let this run. And yeah, we're getting pretty close to being done here. Appreciate you guys sticking around with me. While this is running, I guess we can talk about different things up here. Obviously, you can interrupt. I could interrupt it right now and stop it, or if you want to skip it, let's say it's like you have a couple of things batched out, you can just go ahead and skip that process. Here we have regeneration parameters from prompt or last generation of prompt is empty. So that's pretty handy if you emptied it out and you're like, oh crap, I wanted to bring that back. You can drop that back in. You can clear the prompt with that button. This is your extra networks. So your things like your textual embeddings, your LoRa's, your hyper networks, the stuff I mentioned over here in the training tab. That's where you can load those in, is right here. The ones you have installed. If you apply selected styles to current prompt, so if you have a style that you've already saved with this button, so you can save a style. Like I could save, I don't really have a lot of style modifiers on here. Usually when I do this, what I do, let's say we like the lighting or whatever, or we like the setting and all that, you could hit save, and then it'll pop up a dialog box, and you can write the name of that style. Let's put in, like, let's say I put in my boilerplate negatives prompt that I used to use. We could do something like this, and you hit apply selected styles to current prompt, and it'll actually delete it from here. That way it doesn't double up, and then it will type those in for you. So this is pretty handy if like you want to double check, okay, what do I have going on in this style? Let me make sure that I'm feeding it the prompt that I want. So you can come in, and that allows you to edit the style and all that, and also see what's in it, rather than have to go in and open the styles CSV that's saved in your Stable Diffusion folder. But that's the styles thing there. And these are very handy because you can come in here and let's say you find a prompt that you really like, sort of a lighting you like and all that. You can save that, and that way you don't have to remember it every time and type it in every time. So yeah, that's pretty much the overview here. I haven't talked about these. I don't really use these too much. These I do use for sure though. So if you hit like, well, let's show this real quick. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's our different sampler comparisons. And these are going to be different depending on what you're working on, you know. You may find that one sampler works a little bit better for objects or scenery or landscape, and you may find that a different sampler works better for people. Ones that are typically recommended, a lot of people like DDIM. Like I said, my favorite is DPM++ 2M Keras. A lot of people like these others that aren't the Keras ones. The Keras ones are a little bit different based off of some technical paper that was written by somebody named Keras. I don't know the particular details there, but that's sort of where that comes from. And a lot of people just like Euler A too. So that's what's going on there. Let's turn off the XYZ plot. We'll just do that by setting that back to none and removing that script. Give us another image here, and I'll show you guys these buttons, and then we'll wrap things up. So we can send that to image, and here we go. Now we have it in image to image. And let's say we wanted to change that to, this probably won't work, but we'll say anime style. And we hit generate. And then there you go. It's this is supposedly more of an anime style. It's not, but that's sort of, it's just to give an idea. I might have to go through. Really, this kind of turned into more of like a text-to-image tutorial, like overview, but sort of with other things. We'll do a separate video just since this one's already so long on image-to-image. But yeah, I'm sort of rambling now, so we'll wrap things up. You can use these buttons to send them different places. Again, we'll do a different video on probably image-to-image and in-painting and all of that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Sorry it was a little bit long. Sorry it was a little bit rambly. I like recording these videos sort of off the cuff and as I go along. Sometimes I do script my videos because it does help me make them more concise. I probably should have done that on this one, but it's just a lot more fun for me to just sit down and talk about it, which is one of the reasons I kind of used to stream. But anyways, look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Hope you guys find this one helpful. Let me know again in the comments if you have any particular questions, things you'd like to know, things you'd like to see videos on, and I'll see if I can make some. And we'll kind of get this YouTube channel thing going. So appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.